I got you on camera. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the concluding week of the winter practice period. It's my pleasure to introduce our guiding teacher, Dokai Georgesen, as the speaker today, and thank you all for joining us.
Good morning to everyone. Yeah, I'm getting a little concerned here that I draw the least amount of Mary, thanks for showing up. You too, Carl, if you're actually hanging in there. Great. Well, so, you know, I was being here for, So this is the conclusion of 3 weeks of being here doing a fairly intense practice here at Hokyoji. First 2 weeks we were led by GD, Onru Kennedy, Gentle Dragon, and we talked about women, ancestors. This last week we've been focusing on the Mindfulness Sutra, and I struggle with giving a Sunday morning talk on the Mindfulness Sutra, except I could just say, just be mindful. That would be the end of the talk. However, so I picked out another topic to talk on that's not unrelated to practicing mindfulness. And for information, Mary, we've had 6 people here at this for this week, and it's gone, very, very well. And but I elected not to give like formal Dharma talks for this session. It was just 5 other advanced practitioners. So we just had discussions. And so today I was prepared for like 20 people to show up. However, now we have 7 or 8. So I might just continue in the same vein, kind of not a real formal talk. We'll see how it goes. I never know what's going to happen beforehand. Well, I'm selected a passage from You Have to Say Something. That was a series of Katagiri Roshi's Dharma talks that were recorded, that were made into a book, and this particular book was edited by Steve Hagen. And particularly, the particular chapter I chose was Make Yourself at Home. And maybe one of the things that struck me about it is I have been talking a fair amount this past year on the being the cook for the Tenzo Kyokai. And it just so happened I've been the main cook for this past 3 weeks. And the first line of this chapter, called Make Yourself at Home, says, in his instructions for the cook, Dogen wrote. So it captured my attention once again. And here's a passage which I've reflected on quite a bit. So and I think Katagiri Roshi really hits the mark on what this passage means. So here's how the chapter goes. Again, written by Katagiri Roshi. In his instructions for the cook, Dogen writes, put those things that naturally go on a high place onto a high place, and those things that would be most stable on a low place onto a low place. things that naturally belong on a low place find their greatest stability there. That's a quote by Dogen. And then Katagiri's commentary on that is, Dogen is not talking about hierarchy here. And it really never occurred to me that he was, but I get it. He's maybe talking about people saying, well, why are you the... I'm just, kind of speculating here. I haven't, didn't actually press Katagiri Roshi after the talk and ask him, what the heck was that about? But I have a feeling people were probably presenting him with questions of hierarchy and Zen. He's the head person, and all that. And then we have positions down. However, so maybe this gave rise to that. Who knows? I don't know exactly. So Dogen is not talking about hierarchy here. He is simply stating that if you put a cup on a high shelf, it can easily break if it drops to the floor. If you put it on a lower shelf, it's safer. I'm going to stop right there, because I don't really think so. I think that analogy wasn't quite on the mark, It's going to break, Whether if high shelf is here, low shelf is here, it falls to the floor, it's going to break, It's not going to... But anyway, we could kind of think about that a little bit and find a metaphor that really works for us. Like maybe great big heavy things you don't put up here, and put them kind of a little lower, or whatever. You find the place, and that shifts. For example, in this session, I had to shift where the pots go. Okay, the big pots we're not using. Go away at the back because there's only 6 or 7 people. So you put the smaller ones. It's just, there's nothing mystical about this. It's just things go, you find the right place. And it's a practice we really do. We really do actualize, because we're always trying to make things neat and orderly, Just trying to do that, not obsess about it, just have, people see the place, it's neat, it's organized, it's clean, both where you can't see and where you can see, that kind of thing. One passage that struck me that I read a long, long time ago was from Dark Night of the Soul, St. John of the Cross. And after his awakening, he just, St. Francis of Assisi, who couldn't talk for a few months or something. But anyway, his practice was, of course, very totally grounded in poverty. He had no funds. So in those days, I guess, you could find abandoned churches and kind of claim them, as your own. Because it's just sitting there and no one's been around for a long, long time. I guess people didn't mind, just started taking care of it. And that's what he did. It was all crumbled down and everything. And I remember someone was attracted to how he was, just as a person. I don't remember the person's name, but anyway, the person looked at this, St. John, I'm making this up, but St. John looked at this church and said, oh my God. No, he didn't say. He said, wow, we could make a wonderful church here. His disciple said, are you kidding? Are you kidding? This is a piece of, there's nothing here. It's just all crumbles. He said, how are we going to start? So St. John, he goes over and he finds this big rock. Struggles with it, moves it, and says, that's our cornerstone. Okay. So they just go from there, one block at a time. Maybe some, I don't know how much was, actually, stable as a foundation, but they more or less started from scratch. And so after several years, they have this, kind of nice little, very modest church in a certain kind of way. And I read the story, someone came to visit and saw the church, and they said, such a very humble abode, nothing, no extravagant carvings, here, nothing like that. But everything had its place. It was very neat and orderly, and everything was just very, very well taken care of. And they just thought, for such a poverty-stricken temple, everything is very orderly and clean. And they were just so impressed by that. And so, that's what I believe is really the authentic way to practice. We're just taking care of everything we have, no matter if we have great artwork or things. We haven't spent a lot of money on artwork at Hokyoji, but some really nice artwork gets donated. So that's kind of the way we get nice things. Any comment, Mary? No, not yet. All right, well, keep attuned. That's how we would do it to our session. We would say, I won't ask for any commentary yet. I'll keep going. Okay, in other words, you have to understand as clearly as you can the life of the cup. You have to understand what a cup is, what a knife is, a fork is. You have to understand the life of each thing with compassion, kindness, friendliness, and consideration. Although Dogen presents this as advice to the chief cook, it's really instructions for all of us about how to live. Without intruding or being overbearing, we must put ourselves in the place of others and learn to deal with them as they are. So this is really the whole practice. I mean, it's talking about cups and pans. It's really talking about how do we live in community? How do we do that kitchen? How do we make that kitchen so that it will function to serve food for the community? So, but it's not just related to the kitchen. It's related to our whole community. How do we treat each part of the community, have it, just as it is, with total respect for it. And again, it's not about hierarchy, but you don't make the first person, who shows up the abbot. So it's just about, you give them a position that can help them where they have their vital part, and it's not higher, it's not lower, it's just part of the function of how we function together. And we learn, and we know that, okay, when I go to, is it festival? I always like to call it Rainbow. Rainbow was in Minneapolis for many, many years. Anyway, Festival is our main, one of the main chains in lacrosse. So I digress because sometimes I call it Rainbow. Okay, and anyway, when you go there, now why did I say I'm even bringing that up? Okay, because the new employees will say, I'm new. I'm new. Give me a little space. Don't like if I'm really kind of slow bagging the groceries or checking out. Just don't like come down on me really hard, just give me a little space. So that's kind of how we do it here too. We give people a little space. Okay, you're brand new, yeah. Okay, just do the best you can, and we'll support you, and we do that even with the old ones too. The old ones who've been around for a long time. So thank you for all the space you give me. So once we know the life of a spoon, it's clear. Okay, this is where it goes. This is where it goes. We're not separate, he goes on now. But we should understand that the place is never separate from us. So it's also about the spoon, the fork, but it's about people. It's not separate from us. Their place, like ours, is the universal place in which all sentient beings are perfectly situated. If we think in terms of hierarchy, then we will see everything as existing separate from us. For example, through our conceptual understanding, we'll see, he uses metaphor, simile of a tree, but see things completely different from ourselves. For example, through our conceptual understanding, we will see a tree as being completely different from ourselves. But the tree actually exists beyond our conceptual understanding. It exists in that universal place of equality with all beings. When you sit in Zazen, the tree has already returned home and sits with you in peace and harmony. At that time, the tree finds its own place, the place where it exists naturally. But if you think you're separate from the tree just becomes a concept or an object. When a tree becomes a tree as it is, it creates a wonderful world that is rich and generous. When we allow the tree to become a tree as it is, we have a close and intimate communication with it. Why? Because it is just there, creating a wonderful space where everyone can feel relief. So that's the practice we try to cultivate here at Hokyoji when we're doing, or whenever we're here practicing. If we think in our ordinary dualistic way, we can't find such a space. If we only study trees biologically and physically, as though they are objects separate from us, we will then have no true understanding of what a tree is. We don't understand that when we make it an object, we kill the life of the tree. I am reading this novel, it's just a regular little novel, make things up out of just the creative mind. And it's basically about trees. And this is just a fascinating author. It's called The Understory by Richard Powers. His ability to create sentences is just like phenomenal. But he did say something, that I actually underlined because it struck me as something that, is this real? Is this true or not true? He says, nothing can be known as a fact. Nothing can be known as a fact. And he says, you can only just observe. I don't know if that's true or not, but it struck me. It stopped me right then and there. I said, is that true? Nothing can be known as a fact. There's some sense of that seems true, because the facts just keep changing. I mean, you can get a scientific fact, like, under these conditions, this chemical reaction will create this thing. We know we can prove it, do it over and over and again. It always repeats. Until you start looking deeper and deeper and deeper, and you say, wait a minute, this isn't kind of going just exactly the way we thought it was going. I don't know. It's just something that struck me. This is not like, philosophical. This is just a novel. It's just a novel. But, so that was one point. And then he did say, all that can be known is just observation. All we can do is just observe. That's what it said. It's just a statement that struck me. I'm not going to say much more about it. But however, it was written in the context of this person, this woman, who had some kind of, born with some kind of deformity or something compromised with, I think it was her ability to hear. I think that's what it was, in the novel. And she had a really wonderful, loving father who was really into teaching her about trees and nature and stuff. So she got really, really interested. No, this is all fiction. Okay. But anyway, she got really, really interested in it, and essentially, she proposed in this novel. She proposed that trees can communicate with each other. This was like a long, long time ago. And by diseases, something, they're doing something with their roots, some kind of, and then I think first everyone thought she's nuts, totally nuts. And then later they said, oh, I think something's going on here. Then she became famous, and then later someone debunked the whole thing. Some like big guy said, this is totally stupid. She really got this totally off. So then she became nobody again. And then she would just scrounge around in the dirt and the mud, the bugs and mosquitoes, studying plants and trees. So this is, so when I read this, I'm remembered of that character in this movie, because that's how it is for me when I'm out here. It's like, you don't get to know the trees without getting bitten by like lots of bugs and getting your fingernails dirty and things like that. But you're really getting into the life of a tree. And that's what she was doing. In the novel, she'd come home with like 45 insect bites or something. So anyway, that's really, just to make a sad story okay again. She was digging around in the mud, and nobody knew her anymore, and a few years went by, and then somebody came by, some forester or whatever, and I don't know, they have this conversation, and she didn't know it, but her work got kind of popularized again, and she was like famous again, but she didn't know it. So this guy comes around, this forester, and they're working together for some reason or another, and he said, do you know a theory about trees can communicate with each other? It's famous, it's really, really super interesting. And she said, yeah, I created it. So, and you didn't know that he was talking to the person who created the story. So that's the happy ending. I actually haven't finished the whole chapter, so it might turn.
Next time.
Yeah. So anyway, okay, that's my version of how it's not just looking at trees, we get into the mud and dirt. So, so he says, you have to return home and sit in peace and harmony. This means placing the tree where it ought to be to express its life as a tree. Placing the cup where it ought to be to express the life of the cup. Fork and knife. As chief cook, you have to deal with forks, vegetables, pans, and so on, placing them where they ought to be. The best way to take care of your objects for you, the subject, is just merge with them. When you extend your life to them, you give them the chance to extend their lives to you. This creates a soft and wonderful space through which you communicate. This is the magnanimous space of Buddha's world. So what I also wanted to say in relationship to this, when he says, when you give this tree or cup, these magnanimous open space and let it speak to you, then also things change. The hierarchy changes. It's like, oh, why don't you be the next time? But it's like, we don't have a fit. It's like you come in and you're new, but you're not new forever. You don't stay there. It's constantly shifting. And that's how we're speaking, talking to each other. If we really keep having an open view of what we're meeting, what we're experiencing through this practice. So that's all I have to say. And my short, no, 3 minutes short.
No time. It's time.
Okay, now we're ready to have a discussion. If we want.
I have 2 points.
Okay, Richard, thank you.
So Adam Frank is an astrophysicist and he's hired by NASA to look for alien life. And
Can you hear Mary? You can hear Rushin speaking? Okay, go ahead.
so he speaks at the Varela Institute, sponsored by Upaya, and he gets really upset when people, he's a physicist, right? So he says when all these things came out with the books of quantum physics related to Buddhism, he said, that's just one interpretation. He says, and so there's no facts. He says there's just competing narratives.
Mm-hmm.
Just, if you like this narrative, you go with that.
Yeah.
If you like this narrative.
Oh, wow, that one sounds exciting.
Yeah.
Grooves with Buddhism. Yeah, sorry.
And the second point is, Dave Bruss and I go up north and we hike the Superior hiking trail. And a lot of times we go to the places we like, and then sometimes we go to places we haven't been yet, just to see what, in case that's a nice place too, right? So we went, there was a big blowdown, and we're crossing trees, and we walk into a space that had obviously been logged out. Well, if you're up there for wilderness, you don't like to walk in a place that's been logged out. And there's all these just poplar trees in the aspen family. And it's like, so we're walking 5 minutes in, still poplar. 10 minutes in, still poplar. 15 minutes in, still poplar. It's like, this is kind of amazing. And it's like, that tree is a community tree. Those trees are in touch with each other, and as they lose trees, they will pop up another tree to replace it in that root system. So eventually you get in, you're walking through this grove of trees for 20 minutes, and your whole idea of where you are and what you're doing changes. You're in their space. And it's impressive. It's not, you may want to see white pine and red pine, but here you are, that these trees have taken over this whole space.
Yeah, part of this, part of what this book advocates, that trees live in community. It's a community. You usually don't just see it's unusual to see just a single tree growing somewhere.
It reminds me of a term I heard that I loved, which was the wood wide web.
The wood fiber. Good.
When you're talking about Katagiri Roshi's talk, and I related that to Dogen talking about when you sit, you're sitting with the grasses and trees, pebbles and walls, and all beings, and you're sending the Dharma out to them, and then it comes back to you. And that is in the Jujunu Sama, yeah. And I love that. I love that. I did a lot of, we on Rio had a study group, and we studied it, and I really enjoy that piece from Dogen. So got me into Dogen. So
Yeah. Mary. Yes, Mary.
I can hear voices. Some I recognize. I recognize Rushin and Hyoku and Jushin. Anyway, I'm not sure who just spoke.
Oh, yeah, that was
I'm Yoni.
Yoni.
Oh, okay. Yes, I've seen your face. Yeah. Zoom. So very good. You guys kind of jealous here. Wow. You've had a very, I'm sure, intimate and really great week with a lot of wonderful discussion with very esteemed Buddhist practitioners.
And I was expecting you to be here, Mary.
I was going to say, you can come next.
I'm not. I would have brought in a different kind of practitioner, but anyway. So I did read. I've read the overstory. I'm sure maybe others have, but I think actually, it was kind of a mind-blowing book for me because I read it for a book group, and we have I think 3 biology teachers in my book group, so they're always bringing in this great natural science stuff, and I do believe that it won the Pulitzer Prize, the overstory, anyway. And it blew my mind because of exactly what you're saying, the roots of trees, and they're in this communication constantly. So that's pretty cool. But what I wanted to say, what your Dharma talk brought up for me, a lot of things, of course, okay, but so if you go from nature to people functioning together. I'm listening to a Audible by Aya Kema, who you probably know her. Anyway, it's called The Path to Peace. And so I was in relation to what you're saying, in that when you're functioning together in an environment that's controlled, like you're, at a session, and there's protocol and rules, and it's just lovely, because things are made simply. And at home, I've actually tried to get rid of dishes that we don't use anymore. We don't need 12 plates. I mean, there's 2 of us, and sometimes we have friends. So that sort of simplification is sort of always in our culture. Just doesn't. It does not want us to simplify. But the functioning together, if you're with a group of people, I was recently. We're all friends and know each other from years past, and we took a trip together, and so we've got all these people in this Airbnb, trying to function together all week. And what I was realizing about myself, because of partly my practice, my Buddhist practice, is my ego, and how, and Aya Kema, I think that's how you pronounce her name, she talks about being proud. There's this ego thing going on with, something bothers you, something is not going right. I can be hyper vigilant, not sure if I'm doing enough. All of these emotions that come up when you're with people that you're not, or maybe you don't know, and there's kind of no rules. Everybody's sort of just trying to figure it out. And one thing that I really felt in my body was something called in sort of this ego pride, was this stiffness. You become kind of sort of stiff, and I found myself during the week not always agreeing with what's going on, and like conversation, and maybe maybe it was me, too much talking, and and I love these people. But it was it was challenging. And I think your point here, what you said, is what I felt was I needed to kind of retreat sometimes, just retreat, be alone, and then really think about giving others space. I was really kind of at times caught up in, sort of my own thing. Of course, there was all alcohol too, in the evening, wine, and out to dinner and whatever. So I guess that stiffness, pride, ego, functioning together, giving people space, not getting so, I need to control this, allowing that to happen in the moment. I was just thinking about that quite a bit during the week. Anyway, that's just my pride stiff.
Well, we studied the body quite a bit here the past few days, and in mindfulness of what happens in our body when it's tense and how we're moving this way, moving that way. Well, while you're speaking though, this has always been something I thought about for years and years and years. I have a group of personal friends who aren't Buddhist. Now, would I want to get together for a week and sit with them and just hang out and talk? No. No. But then I have this other group of people who I do that with, just like the 6 in this room right now. And I can do that with, but I also think, in normal life, I would not choose these people. It's just that we showed up together to do this thing that we do. And you're right, we make rules. I mean, there's rules. We might think, we don't have too many rules, but really, we have a lot of rules. If you're going to come into this place and do this practice, you do have to follow the rules. And maybe that's why there's not hordes and hordes of people. But but it only works if we follow the rules. You know what? Keeping our mouths shut.
No talking, that helps a lot.
It's kind of like that. I mean, it's kind of nice to talk sometimes, but if you just keep talking and talking and talking, no doubt it's going to go south. So that's just the way it'll go.
This is what destroyed the counterculture. Communal living seemed like such a good solution, and then you realize, I don't get along with these people. Really. I got to get a job so I can live away from
my own
these people.
space.
Have my own space, yeah. So it seemed like it was a good idea at the time, but the deeper you got into it, I need to have more income.
Well,
I have to join the real culture to make money to get away from this kind of lifestyle.
Yeah, well, it just comes down to it. If you're gonna live in community, you gotta have rules. I mean, you gotta have a certain set of, rules you all agree to. And if you don't like the rules, then you go somewhere else, But, even in those, what do you call it? Where you have a group of people living together in a condominium or association or
Oh, yeah.
something. I mean,
HOA.
yeah,
Yes.
or you become a organization, you get a president, and you make
Yeah.
some rules.
Oh,
Yeah, and there's definitely rules.
Yeah, well, I mean, and they're all different, but you gotta have some rules,
I lived for 18 years on 10 acres that was part of a 40-acre block that had been split up, and it had a couple of woods. You could kind of go through them, and it just this is no pun intended, but it kind of grew on me. And I would go walking frequently on the paths, and there were different parts. There was one section that had 5 old, very large oaks, and they had arranged themselves somehow in a kind of circle. So they felt like grandparent energy. And then periodically, of course, we have storms. And there was one that brought down one of the large oaks. And at first it was a surprise, but it was interesting. First of all, immediately the environment responded. So this was like great news for critters. They had housing, they had all kinds of things. And then there was I think it was probably an aspen family tree that was just new, just barely a tree. And it was now bent over for life because the big oak had fallen on it. And I thought, I wonder if it has any feelings about that. I just felt my back hurt to look at it. But the reason I think that comes to mind is, in another way, there aren't any rules. There's only what we do. And things in a forest kind of arrange themselves. Some of them die, some of them, that tree will be contributing for probably several hundred years in some form or another in service to that environment. Or that's one perspective. So I don't think humans are outside of that, but it's something I'm observing.
Well, I don't think there's an accident that where Zen took root, it was also in a culture dominated by Confucianism.
Dominated by?
Confucianism, which knows a lot about rules.
Yeah.
Because, as I like to say, humans don't scale. From our evolutionary past, we're probably used to having about 30 people around us all the time, and a larger group of 300. Groups would split off for the season and hunt and forage and then come back and do that sort of thing. And one of the explanations for architecture is just simply that, as we're just not used to having so many strangers around. And so you can look at architecture and it makes you feel a little more comfortable. But you do kind of need rules. I like thinking back to the cup, though, and the function of the cup, because one of my favorite things has always been about the Dharma of insentient beings.
The Dharma of insentient
beings, yeah. And it kind of reminded me, I know I've talked about it, it was the poem by David White, Everything is Waiting for You.
Okay.
He's got a lot.
Yeah, it's the one where he talks about the teapot and everything being angry at you.
Oh.
And if you just give them another chance, that they're willing to give you another chance. Because it does, neurologically, when you pick up a pencil to write, it, as far as your brain is concerned, it has become a part of you. It has become a part of you.
Oh,
So it thinks of it as an extension of it.
Yeah, mine. Mine.
Body. Body, mind.
what's that, Alan?
So, Mary, this is Alan Williams, in case you're wondering. Another aspect of how people get along together, work together, that's coming up for me is that, and maybe this is in Western society or American society, but we may not have rules, but we have agreements. We have some, and sometimes those agreements aren't even spoken. But in order to live together, function together, there are agreements that about what we do and what we don't do, and how we respond to the people that we live with, whether we give them space, whether we give them respect, and so forth. It seems to me that for me, the Zen container, I understand there are rules, and at the same time, it feels like people who do this together have an agreement that we're going to do it this way. It's not so much that, it's wrong, no, it's an agreement that this is how we're going to do it, and this makes for a beautiful space
Can
together.
get along, go forward together without hindrances.
I mean, imagine if Mary's group stayed in that Airbnb for a year. Rules would come up. There would be agreements. There would be agreements.
Like, we only drink alcohol 2 nights a week.
Well, when you think
This is how
about
you
it,
fill the dish. This is how you stack the dishwasher.
Well,
when you think about it, if you live in a neighborhood, it's a kind of a condo. And sometimes we live in the neighborhoods for decades.
one of the agreements in a group like Mary's talking about, and I think about my law school housemates and the reunions we've had, but one of the agreements is how far do you let people go? When there are people who will get on each other's cases, who don't, I lived with a group of people who were very different from one another, and those differences sometimes created more than friction. And so it's like, how far do you let it go before somebody steps in and says, hey, wait a minute, let's cool it.
I think Mary was going to say something.
Well, sorry, it's echoing for some reason here. Oh, is it echoing? No. I really appreciate your comments. This is great. I feel great that I've been able to join your group. This group I'm talking about, they probably won't listen to this recording. So they are all old neighborhood friends. We've known each other for 40 years. One of the things that really struck me, and this comes up all the time, and I have to knock my brain. It's like, okay, constant change. We're just impermanent. We're changing all the time. So this particular group hasn't really been together for about 5 years. We've seen each other individually, but we haven't really taken a week long for 5 years. People's lives changed dramatically in 5 years. Families change, everything changes. So, it's not like it was. We love each other. It just wasn't like it was, years ago. It wasn't like it was 40 years ago. We're all in the same neighborhood. Why is it that I can't understand? It's like I have to just be hit with that all the time. Change, 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 change. Everything's changing moment by moment. So that's my thought. Thanks for listening. So
Well,
Yeah, the way life is really irritating sometimes, isn't it?
I was thinking a little over a year ago, I was in New Zealand, and I was there for about a month, but I waited 2 weeks before I rented a car, because, you know, they drive on the left side. And so the first time I was driving, and I was watching, you know, because I was actually a passenger in someone else's car, and I was really watching how they drive, and first thing I seen, yeah, I guess they all are committed to driving on the left side. But when I got, and I know there's a rule. There's a rule in the US, we drive on the right, you know, basically. Okay, that's a rule, and you follow that rule. But it says, everyone agree to that rule? So, especially when you're going around bends that you can't see. So anyway, that was one thing. But I also thought about another unspoken rule was I lived in Japan for a year in a small temple. We had about 4 of us guys lived together in a room about this side. Well, about this size square, 20, this is 20 wide, so, you know, going back 20 feet from the other square. 4 of us. And we each took a corner, the door was there. And it's like these, we got along pretty well. But we all had these kind of unspoken rules. Like if you were, like, and usually if we each had a little desk and would face the wall. If you came in and the person did look at you, you know, if you're studying looking at them, you don't say hi. Good afternoon. You just go in and you don't say anything. And there's little, no one wrote them down or anything like that. But you know, also in Japan, they make the buildings so that they're more amenable to earthquakes. So you know they'll move like this. Oh, we had this one a Canadian fellow who was like 6'5" and like 205 pounds, and we got up at 4 a.m. But he wanted to do exercises before in the morning, so he got up at like 3, and then from 3:30 to 4, he'd be doing jumping jacks. Jumping, you know, we're going like this, you know, and he says, you know, Vimal, that was his name, I think we need to set a rule. No jumping jacks in the morning before his zazen, because, you know, we're all pretty tired anyway, getting up at 3:30. Well, anyway, so anyway, there was an example of someone breaking the rule, the unspoken rule. Well, anyway, I think we're down to our last a few minutes here. If there's any more last concluding remarks, we can make them. Otherwise, we'll close up.
Glad to have you here, Mary.
Yes.
Yeah, next year, you know, like in person.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, thank you. I'm very happy to join you today. And Carl too, but Carl is silent. The Carl silence.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just
He's
listen.
probably just taking it all in, absorbing it, probably in deep samadhi. Anyway, he always shows up, so that's good. All right,
Yeah.
we'll close with, let's close with our vows, right? So, or announcements.
I don't
Next week is Alex, I know that.
Yeah.
So next week's speaker is Alex.
Alex and I have switched.
So it's Rushin.
You're next week, so
Yeah.
I guess I'm your host then.
So Rushin is next week.
Okay, Rushin is next week. So we'll look forward to
And we
that.
don't even really have anything on the calendar for the next month.
No, we don't
So,
have
yeah.
anything
In that
really going.
mud season.
Yeah,
Awesome.
some administrative meeting.
Check in and,
Call your friends, Mary.
Call your friends.
okay, well, yeah, so,
Oh, there was a hand waving on Carl's
Yeah,
picture.
Carl clapped.
Carl and he.
okay, all right. Okay, we'll close with vows.
These are numberless. I vow to freedom. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it.
We're still.
All right, bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Oh, bye.
Good eye, Carl.